Greetings! I'm Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. Again, we're still back on delay. We're still catching up. I'm still doing my best to catch up to all these videos. But today, we're going to continue our discussion on keyword abilities in Magic. The one-word abilities that many creatures and some other cards have that give you special abilities, and they may or may not define what those abilities are. And we're going to continue talking about some of the ones that started in the first sets. Now again, some of these weren't defined as words until later sets, but the essence of these abilities started in the first unlimited release of Magic, and the limited ones too. So where are we going to start with? We're going to go over actually 6 today, because 2 of them are related to each other. So the first one I'm going to talk about is banding. Banding doesn't exist anymore. Banding was too complex for even high-level players at the time, and so it has ceased to exist. Because banding is definitely confusing. It gave you 2 abilities that you could use with banding. But let me explain it. You can do 2 things. You can band for defense and band for offense. When you band for defense, you only require one of your creatures to have banding. The one banding creature means you get together a whole bunch of creatures to block one. Now, I haven't really talked about it before, but when blocking in Magic, I could block an attacking creature with more than one of my own creatures. So he's attacking, I could choose a couple of my creatures, especially if I wanted enough damage to kill it off. I might sacrifice a few of my creatures to kill off something attacking just to get rid of it. That's how it would work. Or if I have a couple of big defenders, maybe I want to make sure one of them lives, so I block with both. Also, like it would have trample, I want to make sure none tramples over to me. For whatever reason, what banding allows me to do is to choose how damage is dealt to my creatures. Traditionally, the attacker chooses how damage is dealt to the creatures. So if I'm blocking with 2 1/1s, and he has a 1/1, he gets to choose his 1 damage, which creature it kills. If one of my creatures has banding, and I band them together into one group, that's what I have to say. It's like, I'm using my banding of this creature and making one group. Then, I get to choose how that damages. It's like, oh, I want to keep my banding creature alive, I'm going to kill off the other creature. Now, it does mean things like trample can sort of overcome this, unless I can sort of split the damage evenly across a whole lot of little creatures. But, that's the essence of banding, is the defender gets to choose how the damage is dealt to his creatures. Now, you can band for attack. When you band for attack, your team comes together effectively as one creature. I get together a whole bunch of creatures as one. You can only have one creature in an attacking band that does not have banding. That means if I'm attacking with 3 creatures, 2 of them have to have banding. It's the opposite in defense. Only 1 needs to have banding. Attack, 1 can't. And then it counts as 1 creature for attack. You sort of give all the abilities separately, but you have to consider it 1 creature for attacking purposes. And if it's blocked by a single creature, they're all blocked. If only one of your banding creatures has trample, remember, you're choosing how damage is dealt as the attacker. You could have your 2 other creatures deal damage, and then your trample creature deal damage and have it go over. It's sort of like you can use the other creatures to gang up and sneak over something that tramples. Or sneak something, try to do something like that. But that's the basics of how banding works. It interacts with other abilities strangely. That's the best way to describe it. It doesn't always work with other abilities, but it is gone by the wayside. You can still find older cards that will have it, so you might have to worry about playing with it if you want to play with those older cards, which is perfectly fine. And they are still technically legal in Legacy-type games. I'll explain that later on, how the tournaments work a little bit later. But think of it this way, that I could make a deck and have something with banding in it, and I have to know how it uses if I'm going to use it. Now, there was also another ability that was related to banding called Bands with Others. Bands with Others said a creature type or subtype, and that was the only thing it could band with. So if my creature said bands with dragons, it could only band with dragons, whether it's attacking or defending. It could also say bands with legends, and band only with legendary creatures, regardless of that type. So it could do a subtype or a type. And there were a few examples of bands with others, but again, that was one that it was not around even as much as banding. So now I've talked about banding. Let's move on to the next ability. Let's talk about Defender. Defender is an ability that's been around since the first set, but it hasn't been actually defined until much, much later. What originally were defenders were walls. They were a type of creature that in the rules it said walls can't attack. It's a wall. It can't attack. It can only block. That's what Defender is. A creature with Defender can only block. It cannot attack. The thing is, as creatures that seemed like they wouldn't attack, but weren't walls came out, you needed to evolve that different word. So it became that all walls have Defender automatically, but not all defenders are walls. So it became this one-way street. So in the early sets, it will say, like, a wall can't block. And if you have wall, it might not say that on it, but you have to consider it's a wall, it can't attack. All walls can attack. That's it. And that's the kind of thing you have to think about. Like, a defender, it can't attack. Period. And if you have a wall and it doesn't say anything on it, it's still a wall, it's still not going to be able to attack. It was just sort of in the basic rules originally that walls couldn't attack, and then they made a word for it to sort of add on to the cards to define that if I wanted something that I thought, oh, this isn't going to attack either, I had a word to define it, that I could not just have this rule for just walls. Also, because they ran out of most walls they could do. They did a lot of walls. Occasionally still see some, but it was just like this entire blech of walls for a long period of time for these sort of defenders until they came up with, like, we need something else. Now we've talked about Defender. Let's move on to the next one. Let's talk about Haste. Haste is an attack ability. What Haste allows you to do is if I play a creature with Haste, it can attack or use a tap ability the turn it comes into play. Normally, I play a creature, it has Summoning Sickness. It means like, oh my god, what's going on? I gotta wait till my next turn to use a tap ability or to attack with it, which normally taps it anyway. If it's got abilities which just cost mana or some kind of special thing, I can just do those as playing it. I don't have to worry about haste. But anything that involves tapping or attacking, it needs to have haste to use the first turn I put into play. It means really quick and really ready, and it's like, oh, I'm here, I'm ready to fight. You know, haste is very big in red. I haven't really said like defenders any color. Bands was more white based. I should note that. Though the bands with others were like very multicolored when it came out, and some other places too. But like haste is really big in red. It does show up in other places, but that's the main place you're going to find haste. It's, you know. Okay, so that's all that haste is. It just allows you to act right away. What's next up? Vigilance. Vigilance is another attack ability. It's a pretty good one too. If a creature has vigilance, which I'm going to say, white creatures primarily have vigilance, but again, it can show up in other places, it means my creature does not tap to attack. Okay, so I'm not tapping it to attack. It means that I can attack on my turn, and I can still have my creature open for blocking. A tapped creature cannot block. It's already been used. That's something I haven't mentioned up until now, and I really should have. But I haven't gotten back to some rules about the game. But a tapped creature normally can't block. It can't because it's been used, it's done with. A vigilance creature, since it doesn't tap to attack, is left open to block after it does so. It means I can be a little more aggressive with my vigilant creatures because I know I can have them left over to defend afterward. Alright, that's vigilance. That's all it is. And I'm going to talk about one last ability today, which again has been replaced, like banding. It's called Fear. Fear has been replaced with another ability, which is more broad. I'm going to say that. It's broad spectrum ability, and I'm going to talk about it later. But what Fear was, is if a creature had Fear, it could only be blocked by black or artifact creatures. That's it. So a black creature could block it, or an artifact creature could block it. None of the other colors could block it. Traditionally, Fear was on black creatures. It kind of makes sense that I have a black creature that could only be blocked if I'm fighting black. Or if you have an artifact creature, you could block my creature. It just means that I have a creature that's very fearful, that's hard to defend against. That I need specific types of things to defend against. That if I'm playing a white-green deck with no artifact creatures, I'm not going to be blocking your fear creature at all without something special, like a special card. It's just not going to happen. And that's what Fear does. Okay, so I've talked about 6 abilities actually today, and all of these originated in the original set. Again, they didn't all have that original words to it. You know, they sort of defined and became the words that they were even later in sets, and some of them have gone out of the way and either been replaced or just forgotten about. But anyway, so that's today's episode, talking about magic. Please leave a comment if you want to ask any questions or inquire a bit more about these abilities. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. If you want to join the Empire, we're always looking for more citizens. Please, please, please subscribe. Always looking for more. And until next time, I bid you farewell.